Hi everyone, a very good evening to all of you. I'm Ankita from NASSCOM, and today's session holds a lot of importance for our GTM series. Will be our 18th episode, and the topic is Building Blocks of Sales Enablement, a systems approach to sales acceleration by Mike Kunkle, Vice President of Sales Effectiveness Services, Sparks IQ. Good morning, Mike. A very warm welcome and thanks for joining us, taking out time and delivering a session from a completely different time zone. Thank you so much, Mike.
Well, you are very welcome. Thank you very much for having me. I am excited to be here and to share this content with everyone.
Thanks, Mike. Before I hand over to you, two more things for the audience. You can ask questions anytime during the session. Mike will take few in the middle of his presentation as well after completing every subtopics. Also, please do not forget to leave your feedback to help me better my future sessions. Welcome, Mike, and over to you.
Okay, well, hello everyone. I would say good morning because it's 8 a.m. here, but it's 5:30 there. So I want to thank all of you for taking your time at the end of what I'm sure was a long day to join here and to discuss sales enablement, which is one of my favorite topics, but can be a confusing one sometimes. So while I would love to see all of you and have you see me, I'm going to turn my webcam off now just because I don't want it to interfere with the broadcast. So as Ankita said, our topic is the building blocks of sales enablement, and it's about using a systems approach, using systems thinking to foster sales acceleration. Let's get started. I'm sure you've seen the disclaimer from NASSCOM before, so we'll move past that and talk about our agenda. So our agenda is going to happen in two pieces. The first piece is our main presentation, where we'll talk about the current state of sales enablement, about the maturity models that I've seen, and something that I call the building blocks of sales enablement, which I believe will help you get started or take your current sales enablement function to a higher level. We'll talk about how to apply systems thinking to sales enablement, which I think is one of the things that truly will help accelerate sales performance. And then we'll talk about how to get started if you're not already doing sales enablement. At the end of the presentation, I won't cover these today, but I have some bonus materials for you about performance consulting, which I believe is the future of sales enablement, and some additional resources that you can refer to, and they'll be at the end, and you can download the handout right from GoToMeeting and access all of that information for free. So that's our agenda for today and some bonus materials. Let's start by talking about the current state of sales enablement and multiple perspectives. Now, when you see this slide, there's a lot of words on here. We're not going to worry about each one. You can download the presentation and take a look at all of these definitions. My point here is CSO Insights, Serious Decisions, Forrester, Gartner, Topo, IDC, Aberdeen, all of these analysts have somewhat different definitions of sales enablement. Now, today, CSO Insights has become Korn Ferry. Sirius and Forrester have merged, and they're now talking about what they call revenue enablement, which is enablement across the marketing, sales, and customer success groups. Gartner and Topo have combined, but their definitions so far seem to remain the same. Sales enablement is made even more complex due to what I call the bricks in the wall. And what I mean by this is these are all of the different departments and functions that someone leading sales enablement needs to work with. So there's a lot of cross-functional collaboration that happens. And this is only a partial list of the departments and functions that sales enablement people work with. Want to be further confused? Well, there's a Sales Enablement Society, by the way, at the link at the bottom. It's free to join if you're not already a member. And the Sales Enablement Society has their very own definition of sales enablement. If you're familiar with ATD, or the Association for Talent Development, they have a sales enablement community, and guess what? They have their very own definition of sales enablement, and theirs includes talent selection and incentive and compensation design, which are things that not all of the others' definitions include. If you know Scott Santucci and Brian Lambert, they were some of the original founders of the Sales Enablement Society. Kunal Mehta works for a private equity company, and they're now working together to redefine sales enablement as commercial enablement. And they see the role as someone who is an orchestrator rather than a doer, someone more strategic. And they're focused on improving what they've termed commercial ratio, which is the ratio that you see here, revenue growth over sales and marketing expense. And you can learn more at the links if you want to get into all that. My point is, sales enablement has many, many definitions. Another element of confusion, you very often hear sales enablement people say they're working on content or they're responsible for content. I believe we have to stop saying just the word content. There is marketing content. There's buyer engagement content that you create to engage your buyers. There's training content to train your salespeople. And there's sales support content like job aids or other materials that can help them do their jobs better. All of those things are content, yet very often at conferences or on webinars, we'll just talk about content and not even clarify what we're saying. So what's the bottom line to all of this? Well, sales enablement is unclear to many. Many of the definitions are similar, but they're not the same, they're not aligned, and apparently sales enablement is still evolving. So this is an odd place to start, but this is reality that across many organizations, sales enablement is not defined the same way, and it's unclear where it's all headed at this point. Before I move on to try to bring some clarity to this confusion, are there any questions at this point?
Mike, as of now, we have no questions.
Excellent. It's too confusing for questions so far. So let's take a look at what I call the sales enablement maturity models. These are various levels of sales enablement in organizations. The first level is there's no sales enablement. My CEO says, jokingly, leave them alone and let them sell. There's no effort here. There's no impact on sales performance whatsoever. Then there's the random maturity level. This is highly reactive. It's arbitrary acts of sales enablement. There's firefighting. They're distracted by bright, shiny objects. This level of sales enablement, they're trying to do something, but it's really unlikely to impact sales performance and improve results. Then it begins to form a little better. It's an informal maturity model. There's some structure now. It's not strategic, it's not systemic, it's not necessarily scalable. Right? It's partly data-driven, but there's still likely a limited impact on sales performance, but it is progressing to have more of a structure to it. Then there's the formal model. This is what I refer to as the sales enablement building blocks with a charter. There's now cross-functional collaboration. It's supported by systems thinking. Sales enablement at this maturity model is strategic, structured, systemic, scalable, it's measurable, it's data-driven, and this is where you start to have a real impact on sales performance. The final model is a very high level termed adaptive. It's the same as the above formal level, but it layers on performance consulting practices. This is data-driven, it's diagnostic-based, it's a continuous focus on improving sales performance, by diagnosing first and then prescribing. So these are the maturity models that I refer to: non-random, informal, formal, and adaptive. Today's focus in the webinar is going to be on the formal level of sales enablement. It's the sales enablement building blocks with a charter, and the bonus materials will point you toward a more adaptive model, right? When you look into the bonus materials and the additional resources. Now, why do I think it's so important to get to formal quickly? Because formal sales enablement helps impact win rates and quota attainment, and there are multiple studies that show this. Here is one from the Miller-Hyman Group and CSO Insights showing that organizations with a formal maturity model or a formal maturity model and a charter perform higher on win rates, starting at random with 39.2%, ending with formal and charter at a 55.1% win rate. That is an obvious positive impact. The same study with CSO Insights also showed that when we became buyer-centric, when we dynamically align sales process to the customer's path or the buyer's journey, win rates would also increase, as well as quota attainment, as you can see here. So sales enablement is definitely having an impact. I'll share one more here. A study by the Sales Enablement Pro organization on the state of sales enablement showed that formal sales enablement and a charter got 12% higher win rates and 35% better quota attainment. So what's the bottom line here? Well, it's absolutely shown that sales enablement done well can make an impact. If you have a charter, meaning you have an aligned view in your organization across all the different functions of what sales enablement is, whatever your definition of all the ones that you've seen before, whatever you align around in your organization, and then you get it to a formal maturity model with the building blocks that I'll share with you, sales enablement absolutely can produce results. I know it's early yet probably in the presentation for questions, but I promised I would stop at each section and ask, Ankita, do we have any questions so far?
Mike, we have no questions so far. Audience, you can ask questions because Mike will be completing one subtopic and then he'll, wait for 1 or 2 questions. So you please ask your question. Be curious, ask questions.
If you have them, ask. If you're still waiting till we get to the meat, that's okay too. So
sure.
Let's take a look at the building blocks of sales enablement, this formal approach that I've talked about. A lot of sales enablement organizations start at this point right here. It's a high-level view. It's not all of the building blocks, but this is a great starting point if you're not doing sales enablement today. Working on messaging, on content, meaning marketing, buyer engagement, training, sales support content, on training and tools to ensure that your sales force is having the right conversations with the right buyers at the right time, right? And this works great because it supports, I'm sorry, I've had a little slide issue here. There we go. It supports good decision making, and improves sales win rates. This is a wonderful starting point. Now, the building blocks, I think, is where you can really start to make an impact. So let me walk through these with you. It starts with a focus on the buyer. It's what I refer to as buyer acumen. Instead of sales acumen or business acumen, it's really understanding your buyers, your buyer personas, what matters most to them, how they make decisions. And then it's what content would you need to create to engage those buyers as they're moving through an opportunity with you, or even early, right, when you're prospecting, to make them want to have the interest to engage with you. And then what content will you create that will support your sales team in being able to work with those buyers and engage them. The next row of the building blocks is about your talent. Hiring the right people, training them effectively, whether it's onboarding or ongoing training, and then supporting them with sales coaching to help them use the training and support the buyers as they're going through their buyer's journey. The next layer of the building blocks is about process and methodology. It's understanding your sales process. It's ensuring that it's aligned to the buying process, ensuring that the methodology that you're using is buyer-centric and will guide your buyers through the sales process to a win. And it's having the sales analytics in the metrics and measurements in place to allow you to track progress through the sales process to that win. The next layer of the building blocks is about the technology and tools that your sales team will need to use. I'm sure you're very familiar with all of the various sales engagement and sales enablement technology and applications in the marketplace. There are so many of them, but it's choosing the right ones that will support your sales organization and help them achieve their goals. And then this one isn't always considered part of sales enablement, but I believe it is an important building block and an important cross-functional collaboration to understand the sales compensation system and build the compensation, the incentives to produce motivation, and to ensure that sales people are getting paid for serving customers and helping them achieve results. And then the last box here is sales manager enablement. And this is so often missed. I see in so many organizations, they're starting to do the right things to enable their sales force or their sellers, but they are not necessarily doing the same thing to enable and prepare and support their sales managers. And sales managers, especially the frontline sales managers who manage sales reps, they are the lever for change and getting results in almost any organization. Now, these blocks are a great foundation, but I tie it together with two things: systems thinking and then communication. And we'll talk in a moment about systems thinking and how that does tie things together and how you can use it. The other is communication. And what I mean by this, there are two things. One is communication to the sales teams. In many effective sales enablement organizations, they are the sole point of contact to the sales force from the other functions. So that rather than anytime anyone wants something from sales or to communicate something to sales, all this information isn't just flying at your sales force, it's being funneled through sales enablement to be communicated in the same way, in the same format, at various times during the month or week. Now, the CEO, of course, and the senior sales leader can always go direct, but many sales enablement functions are starting to be the point of contact between the rest of the organization and the sales force. And then lastly, it's this cross-functional collaboration that we talked about earlier, or the bricks in the wall. It's having the communication with the other people in your organization in marketing and legal and finance and HR and training, all of these other functions to ensure that you are aligned about providing these things to the sales force. Now, in addition to these things, there is one other possibility in creating your sales enablement organization and the building blocks, and it's what I call sales support services. Now, not everyone has the budget or the manpower to do this, but there are some organizations, Wipro is one that I know does a phenomenal job with this, actually offers support services to their sales force, and they do it almost via an SLA or an agreement. So these are some of the types of things that I've seen done. Buyer and customer facing presentations, creating those presentations or helping their sales reps customize presentations. Sometimes it's doing the research on accounts or contacts for helping the reps prepare for an effective prospecting approach. Sometimes it's preparation services for meeting. Other organizations do RFP support. I've seen a few do deal desks where there are experts in the organization at certain things. And when a sales rep is struggling with one of their deals or sales opportunities, they take it to this deal desk, and some of the experts on the desk help them brainstorm about how should we operate to win this account. Others are coaching services, and the list really is endless, based mostly on whatever it is that your sales force might need to be successful. So those are sales support services. And when you put it all together, this is how I represent it with the building blocks. You see the blocks in the middle, tied together with systems thinking and communication, sitting upon the sales support services. So those are the sales enablement building blocks. Now, I won't cover this next slide in detail here, but I just want you to know that it is in your deck, and it provides at least a little bit more detail on each of the building blocks. And you can download the deck and review that at your leisure. So what's the bottom line here? Well, if you use the sales enablement building blocks, this framework provides a foundation for building an effective sales enablement function. It covers each of the elements that if you get them in alignment and get people together and agreed on how you're going to work with each of these functions, and you support your sales force in each of these areas, this will progress you to the formal maturity model with systems thinking that will allow you to get the results that we saw previously. So that is the building blocks model that we're talking about today. Are there any questions about the building blocks so far?
Yes, Mike, we have a few questions. Krishna is trying to ask you, is there any insights on sales enablement success across various industry verticals, or is this more an agenda for B2B tech industry?
It actually applies to almost any organization that is business to business, and has a sales force that is selling. Generally, it's somewhat of a complex sale, meaning multiple decision makers, somewhat more complicated products sometimes, where the sales force needs more support. So it does work incredibly well in high tech, in SaaS companies, but I'm seeing it expand beyond that into manufacturing, into distribution, into medical device, into pharma. And B2B financial services. I'm seeing it expand across verticals, and there may need to be slight changes depending upon your vertical, right? You should always customize based on your customers, your company, your product, the way you go to market. But the elements of the building blocks tend to remain the same. Hopefully that helps.
Thanks, Mike, for the answer. Jeet has a question for you. Does sales enablement approach remains the same post this pandemic?
Well, some of things have changed, of course. Right now, we're not bringing people together to train them in groups, so we've made a move toward virtual selling. We've made a move toward virtual training. So many people are using GoToMeeting and WebEx and Zoom and other web conference tools to meet face to face and present. So there certainly are going to be changes. So the way that we train and prepare a sales force will still need to do the same things. We just may need to do them differently. And I'll give you an example. Prior to the pandemic, we had a 2-day sales course for training sales managers on our coaching methodology. Once we moved into the pandemic, I began to convert that course to 8 different recordings that people could watch that were 15 to 20 minutes in length, so relatively short. I had homework assignments that they did after watching the recording. We brought people together, and there are 4 virtual instructor-led sessions through Zoom. Then after that, they have job aids and handouts that will help them take what they've learned and prepare to use it with their sales reps as they're coaching them. And so we converted a 2-day course into 8 recordings, 4 virtual sessions, a workbook with homework assignments, and some job aids. That's the type of thing I think that will change. But the content in the boxes and the building blocks have remained exactly the same.
Thanks, Mike, for the answer. We have few more questions. Mike, would you like to take them, or would you like to proceed further with the presentation and look back at the questions during the end?
Yeah, let's take one more, and then we'll move on and catch the others at the end.
Cool. So there's one question by Bhagwati. She's asking, where does pre-sales fit in the building blocks of the sales enablement, especially in the formal maturity model?
Mm-hmm. So each of the different segments or functions in the sales organization, you might have pre-sales. You have SDRs or lead development reps or business development reps. You have account executives who are doing the sales process management, opportunity management. You may have account managers who are, once you win the business, they take over the account and work with them to ensure their satisfaction and to grow the account. Right, somewhere in there you may have a customer success manager who takes over the account and helps implement them. There are so many different roles across the sales organization. Each one of those deserves the same type of enablement, and so the building blocks are not role dependent. You just need to ensure that you are training, enabling, supporting, providing content, whatever they need, giving them the job aids that are required, the education about the buyers, all of the things that matter to them. You're giving each one of those roles enablement. What you're teaching them and how you're enabling them are different, but the framework of the building blocks will not change. Hopefully that helps.
Thanks, Mike, for the answer.
Sure. So let's move on for now and talk about systems thinking and how this applies to sales enablement. That's the first question I would want to answer, is what exactly do I mean by systems thinking, and what is a systems approach? So a system is really any group of interacting, interrelated, interdependent parts that form a complex and a unified whole that has a specific purpose. So interacting, interrelated, interdependent, interlocking sometimes is another word I think of and use, right? That form a complex and a unified whole with a specific purpose. And this was a definition from Daniel Kim, who was the co-founder of Pegasus Communications and worked at the MIT Center for Organizational Learning. Now, that's a lot of words, but what does that really mean? So I have 2 examples that I use for this. One is our human body. We have a circulatory system that moves blood around and oxygen. We have a nervous system. We have a respiratory system, digestive, skeletal, muscular system, and there are other systems even in the human body, the endocrine system and more. So when your nervous system is not functioning right, or if your cardiovascular system or circulatory system is not functioning, obviously you are not healthy. And so when one piece of the system breaks down and isn't working, the human body does not function at its maximum capacity. And the same thing can be said for other systems. The other example that I use is cars or vehicles and automotive systems. Now, these aren't even all of the systems in a vehicle, but there's an exhaust system. There's a safety system. There's the body, obviously, in the interior, right? There's a chassis. There's steering and suspension, braking and powertrain. An example I often use, if you have an eight-cylinder car, if you remember those, and only 4 of those cylinders are firing and working properly, How well is your car going to drive? Not very well, but you know what? The powertrain might be fine. The exhaust system is working 100%. But one piece of the system breaking down can stop it from functioning. Another system breaking down may not. If something's wrong with the interior or there's some dents in the car's body, it's not going to stop it from functioning. It won't be 100%. So some systems may have a little bit more impact on the outcome than others. But all of these things, the human body and vehicles and things, all have these various pieces and parts that if they're all working together, the car or the body functions at the highest possible level. So the question that you have to ask yourself is, how is this different in organizations? And the answer is, it's not. You have hiring systems and compensation systems and coaching and management, learning, development, processes, methodologies. You have all of these different various pieces and parts. And remember, we talked about the bricks in the wall or the cross-functional collaboration. So all of those various functions, how you work with legal, how you work with finance, how you work with HR, how you work with sales operations, all of those things are part of the organizational system as well. And so getting in alignment and bringing these various elements together is what really works and produces results. So what is a systems approach for us, right, in performance improvement work? Well, it's a method of critical thinking and organization design where we analyze the relationships between the parts of an organizational system, understand the system more fully, align them, and then make better decisions about how to improve performance and thereby improving business outcomes. So it's the critical thinking and organizational design and how we weave things together and align them that truly improve the organizational performance. And I'll give you an example here about two systems that I use to make up sales enablement. Now, there is more to sales enablement than just these two, but these two are a big chunk of sales enablement. There's the sales readiness system on the left. And as part of that at the bottom, there's the sales training system, which is so important that I blow that up and show what are all of the elements and the moving pieces and parts of that. So let's take a look at these independently. The sales readiness system starts on the left side with buyer personas, buying process and exit criteria, and buyer engagement content creation. Again, just like in the first tier of the building blocks, this is how you start to put it into a system and use it in your organization. You do the buyer persona work to understand the buyer acumen. You understand their buying process and journey. And exit criteria is a process term that means what has to be completed in a process stage before moving forward to the next stage. So it's part of the buying process. And buying process exit criteria simply means what does each buyer, what do each decision maker in this deal need to see, hear, feel, understand, or believe in each stage of the process in order to move forward to the next stage with you. All right, so that's buying process exit criteria. And if you understand that, you can serve your buyers much more effectively. Then it's having the content to do that. Now, on the right side of the readiness system, there's domain, business and solution acumen, there's sales process and methodology, and there's sales enablement technology. This starts to be on the seller side now, right? You've enabled the sellers with the things on the left side. Now you also want to make sure they have the business acumen and understand your solutions and how they solve the buyer's problems. You want to have a great sales process and buyer-centric sales methodology that will help the buyers go through their process and make decisions. And you want to have the sales enablement technology in place that supports the sellers as they do these things. Now, if you want to know if all this is working, you need to have the analytics to track things like training and content usage and sales behavior and the business outcomes that you want. And then lastly, you have to have some sort of training system in place so that you can actually teach all of the above things and get your sales force ready to sell more effectively, which is the concept of sales readiness. Now, as you remember, we said that the sales training system is important enough to blow out on its own. So let's take a closer look at that. As you look at this model, it breaks up into 3 sections that are color coded. This first one is preparing for the training and preparing for change. It starts in the middle with training content. It's very important that you know that the content that you're using will produce results in the real world if salespeople use it. That's foundational. Then you have to create the right learning design to ensure that they can learn the things that you're teaching them. And you want to engage managers, train them first, help them understand the content, train them on how to coach effectively, right? So that they can engage with their reps and do this next section. The next section is really all about guiding the change. This is what I call the 5 stages of sales mastery and behavior change. You teach the content and the sales reps acquire the knowledge, and then you want to do something to validate that that knowledge occurred, testing, for example. Then there's knowledge sustainment. Just because someone learns something doesn't mean they remember it. So how will you keep that alive and help them remember? Next is skill development. If you're doing sales training, it's very often going to be about skills training. And so how will you give your sales reps a chance to practice to improve their skills in a safe environment rather than practicing on their customer, right? Because just because they learned something and remembered it doesn't mean they can do it. So give them a chance to do that. And then how will you help them transfer those skills to actually use them in the real world? And this is where a lot of training breaks down, because we do event-based training and then we don't help the sales reps actually use what they learned on the job. So this is very important in that regard. All right, so they've learned it, they remembered it, they practiced it, now they're using it. And then just because they've done all those things doesn't mean that they're using it well. So this is where the managers that you've prepared now come in and help coach those sales reps to mastery over time. And those are the 5 stages of sales mastery and behavior change. Now, I do have some more detail on this, and I won't go into great detail with it, but I will show it here at least, that in stage 1, right, you'll see a what row, a how row, and a why row. Right, and there's detail in this that you can look at when you download the slides. But if you remember the why row at the bottom, right, this will help keep it fresh in your mind as well. You learn something new in stage 1. It's known to work, and you're teaching what to do, why to do it, how to do it, maybe when and where. In stage 2, just because they learned it doesn't mean they'll retain it. So what will you do to help them remember it? And you need a purposeful plan for this. So it's about reversing the forgetting curve. Stage 3, developing skills. Just because they learned it and remembered it doesn't mean they can do it. You can have them role play. You can have them coached by managers on doing it and role playing back and forth and help develop their skills. There are a lot of applications and sales enablement tools that you can do remote coaching, which is very important today in the pandemic. In stage 4, right, you can use job aids, you can use forms, you can do things to help your sales reps sit down and prepare to, let's say you just taught them prospecting, and then they sit down and prepare a prospecting approach to use that week with their customers. And then stage 5, skill mastery, right, just because, again, they learned it, remembered it, practiced it, and tried it, doesn't mean they did it well or will continue to do it. So how will you get them over that hump of getting out of their comfort zones to get better and better at this skill until they master it? So those are the 5 stages of sales mastery and behavior change. And there are a lot of tools on the market today that can support this. For knowledge acquisition, there are both learning and sales enablement platforms to help you train people. There are learning reinforcement systems that will send out questions over time that your sales force can answer on a mobile device, and you can sustain the knowledge. There's virtual practice environments for developing skills. You don't even have to be at the same place at the same time. You can do it virtually. In stage 4, which is so important, there are multiple ways from simple job aids, whether they're paper or digital, for sales playbooks, manager toolkits, which help managers know how to run meetings to reinforce what the reps learned and help them prepare to use it. There are applications like Membrane and Revigy and Altify, which actually integrate with your CRM and support your rep in using what they learned on the job. And then in stage 5, there's coaching, of course, but there's also conversation intelligence software that will help you record live sales calls that can be analyzed by artificial intelligence and machine learning, or you can just listen to them individually and then see how did your rep actually use the things that you prepared together and coach them on becoming more effective. There's so many ways that you can use available tools and technology and services to support your sales reps. So those are the first 2 stages of the system. The third stage is cementing the change. Because imagine that you've gone through all of this to enable your sellers to be more effective at selling with buyers and improve win rates, and then they don't actually continue to do it. And unfortunately, this happens in a lot of organizations who don't think all the way through the system. So now you want to get metrics and measures in place to measure how well people are doing, but also that they're doing the things that you've taught them, right? You want to do performance management to manage the performance expectations and the behaviors so that you're reinforcing the things that you want them to do. And then you need to treat this entire project as if it's change management, because folks, it is, right? Anything that we do in sales enablement is basically a little change project. And when we think about it that way, we approach it differently. And this whole system is really geared toward cementing the change and getting that change to occur. So here's the system in its entirety without any other diagrams or colors on it. So you prepare for change, you guide that change, and you cement the change. And that's an example of how systems thinking can support sales enablement. What's the bottom line here? Well, systems thinking really works. It gets everyone in the boat rowing in the same direction. It coordinates processes and activities all aiming toward the same goal. And when you start to look at things in this way as a system, you can radically improve your sales organization's results. So I'll pause here again and ask if there are any questions about this section on systems thinking. By the way, I should say there are other systems. There's a system for hiring. There are sales management systems. There are so many different systems in the organization. I tend to focus on 4, a sales hiring system, these 2 systems for sales readiness and sales training that make up a lot of sales enablement. And then I focus on the sales management system to help the managers know how to get into a cadence and how to work with their teams, right? And then also to remove the obstacles that prevent sales managers from coaching their teams, because very often we throw so much at sales managers that they don't actually have the time or the ability to spend enough of it coaching and developing their reps. So again, I'll pause here and ask Ankita, are there other questions at this point?
Yes, Mike, we have a question. What are some of the metrics to measure sales training effectiveness?
Sure. A lot of organizations try to measure things like course completion or test scores, and those things are are a step toward measuring effectiveness, but they're not enough. So if you truly want to know whether your sales training is effective, I like to take a look at what was the performance of the team that we're training, whether it's pre-sales, whether it's the account executives, whoever you might be training, what was their performance before? And I usually take a length of time that is equal to the average sales cycle. So let's just pretend we're at a company where our average sales cycle is 3 months. I will take a look at that person's performance for 3 months prior to the training and use that as a benchmark. Now, the performance could include a variety of things. It might include their sales process metrics, the number of opportunities in each stage in the pipeline, and the conversion ratios between those. It might include the number of calls they make, the number of conversations they have, and the number of appointments they set. Whatever the metrics are that you measure and that are important to you, that you're trying to improve, would be the ones that I benchmark and freeze as the before training performance. Then for the month that the training occurs, I typically leave that month blank, because very often when you're training someone on a new skill, sometimes the performance actually dips a little before it rises. And that's why it's important to go all the way through the 5 stages to help them try to get to mastery. So I leave the month of training blank, wherever they were trained in that month. Then I look at the same number of months as the sales cycle again after that month. So in our example, we said we looked at the 3 months prior to training. I leave the month of training blank. Then I look at the 3 months post-training and I compare the same metrics, whether again it's conversion ratios, the number of opportunities pursued, their win rates, their sales velocity, whatever it is that you're trying to improve, look at those again and compare the post results after training with the pre-results prior to training. And if I look at that, then I'm actually able to do math and determine what is my return on investment for the training. What did I spend on the training, either in developing it or delivering it and supporting it? And then what was the result that got? How much was that improvement? And compare those two, the cost and the return, to the results to figure out what was the return on my investment. That's one way that I've done it, and hopefully that might help you.
Thanks, Mike. There's another question by Shashwat. He's asking, what are the KPIs one should track between sales and marketing for effective sales enablement?
Well, that's a big question, and we could do a webinar on that alone. But it depends on your organization and how you're set up. So I'll make up an example, and hopefully this will help. Let's say I'm working in an organization where marketing is doing a lot of content production. They are doing videos, for marketing purposes on LinkedIn. They're running ads. We're posting blogs. We're publishing white papers, and they're doing lead scoring, and they're tracking the buyer's consumption of that content. And at some point, when the buyer goes to the website, registers for something, watches a webinar, downloads a white paper, their score indicates that we believe that there's an interest enough that we should reach out to this person. So let's say that they have lead development reps or sales development reps who then will contact that customer either in email or by phone, check in with them and see, what are they learning from the content they've downloaded, what challenges were they facing that led them to review that content, what other questions might they have that we can answer for them, is there some way that we can be helpful, and they develop some interest. Well, now, right, you've had the KPIs of what was the customer doing and how were they interacting with you and your content, right? We've got a score, a lead score that crossed a threshold and kicked that lead into the SDR's world. The SDR has metrics about how, how many times they're calling that person, the connects and contacts, the conversations they have. Oops, sorry, I've got something popped up on my screen there. They have the conversations that they have, and then the appointment that might get set. And then there's an account executive who takes that over. Now, if you follow the serious decisions model, right, we had a marketing generated lead, we had a marketing accepted lead, or a technology generated lead today, I think they call it. We had, calls and conversations, and then an appointment set, at which point that lead is going to be passed off to, as a marketing qualified lead, over to sales. If sales accepts that lead, it becomes a sales accepted lead. All of those are KPIs, or the type of metrics and things that you can track about getting that lead that was generated from marketing over to a salesperson who can then take it, qualify it, and run with it. So it's a complex topic to try to deal with as a simple question in a webinar, but hopefully that will give you some idea. And that's exactly what sales and marketing should be doing, is working that out. And so in your individual organizations, whatever your circumstances are, whatever marketing's doing, however they're passing leads to sales, you need to have those cross-functional collaboration discussions. You need to set a sales enablement charter with them so that you can align on how you're going to be working together. And then that will produce the agreement between the two organizations, and you can track whatever metrics you need to ensure that it's working, and then figure out how to improve it. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thanks, Mike. We have 9 more minutes to go. So what do you suggest? We shall take one more question, or would you like to proceed further?
Let's proceed at this point and see what time we have left, because I do want to get through this next section about how to get started.
Sure.
So there's an old joke. I don't know if you've heard this one about how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. Well, I sort of took that joke and changed it a little bit, right? How do I get to Carnegie Hall? Well, that depends, Bob. Where are you now? And that's exactly how you get started with sales enablement. You have to figure out, where are you now, so you can create a path to implementing the building blocks. And so I recommend starting with a sales enablement charter. Your charter is really all about getting clarity, it's establishing priorities, it's setting expectations, and really it's figuring out, how are you going to work together with all of these other functions? Who's going to do what things are you going to do, and how will you support your sales force? So here are the questions I usually ask in a charter. First of all, why are we doing this? Why are we starting or evolving the sales enablement function? What do we hope to get out of this? And then what are we going to do? How are we defining sales enablement? If we're starting it, where will we start? If we're evolving it, what will you change or add? What roles are you going to support? Is it AE, AM, SDR, BDM, sales engineers and pre-sales, frontline sales managers, channel partners, right? Define the audience. Which of the building blocks from the right will you support? What issues or performance problems will you address? And what are the outcomes that you're hoping to change or deliver? Right? Then you have to think about the who. Who's going to do this? Where is this function going to report? Right? And with what other organizational leaders or functions, the bricks in the wall, or the cross-functional collaboration, who are you going to collaborate with? Then how is the work going to get done between these various groups, and to what level? You're almost building a service level agreement, really, right? How will the work or the desired outcomes get prioritized and measured? How will you collaborate and communicate with your internal partners and report results? And this is that bottom darker blue box in the building blocks, where it says communication, not just with the sales team, but the cross-functional collaboration. If you start here with a charter, it will reduce so much friction and so many challenges over time. Then, right, you can say based on the staffing, budget, and your charter, which of the building blocks are you going to support or support first? How are you going to sew them together with systems thinking and communication management? Are you going to support any of the or provide any of the sales enablement support services that we talked about earlier? It's really about getting clarity about what you're going to do. Then you can assess your current state against your charter and your goals. The current state's point A, the desired future state is point B. You can analyze the gap between those two, look at the impact that you'll make if you move to that. This helps you get the budget that you're required, right? And it starts to be able to help you develop a plan. You can also use the frameworks that we've talked about as your diagnostic tools, right? You can look at the sales enablement building blocks and the support services and say, what are we doing or not doing in each of these areas? And which ones do we need to do better or add? You can look at the sales readiness system and say, how are we taking those things in the building blocks and getting our sales force ready with those things and having the analytics and the training? And how are we going through the training system to ensure that what we're teaching actually gets the results we need? Then you can step back and say, okay, if those are the things that we're going to do and that's how we're going to work, what are the tools that we need to provide to help sales reps move through the 5 stages to sales mastery and deliver the performance that we need? When you work through all of those pieces, then you can start to build a phased sales enablement success plan. You might have multiple phases to this. In each phase, you'll have to plan and execute, measure your results, evaluate the results you've got, make any adjustments and replan and go through that cycle again for each of the phases, all moving toward building out and getting to the formal level of sales enablement with the building blocks, because we know this is what actually produces the organizational result. So that's the content for today. I wanted to remind you, remember, you do have bonus materials on slides 49 through 55. I provide some information on performance consulting. On 56 through the end, you have some additional resources that you may be able to use, and I hope you will find them helpful. So thank you, everyone. That is the content for today. And Keita, I'm happy to answer any final questions in the time remaining.
Thank you so much, Mike. We have 2 more minutes. So there's one question by Krishna. What is the acceptance of sales enablement initiatives by sales reps, and that is indeed adding value for them?
Well, that is an excellent question. And the answer, I think, depends on how well the sales enablement is being done and whether the sales rep perspective has been included. Very often in organizations where sales enablement is not respected by the reps, they don't perceive that they are getting the things that they need to actually sell more effectively. And the same could be said of marketing. I read some statistics recently that there's a large percentage, and I'm sorry, I don't remember the exact percent, but a large percentage of content that marketing produces never gets used by sales reps. And you have to ask yourself why that is. Well, sales reps will tell you that they don't believe that marketing truly understands the customer and that the content that they produced isn't stuff that will help the customers make a decision and help the sales rep sell. And I think very often what happens is we take our eyes off the ball. We try to do something to produce something and get something done, but we don't think all the way through to the customer. Sales enablement should really start with what is the customer trying to accomplish? What are the problems that they're having? What are they trying to do better? right? What are the challenges, the opportunities, the impacts of not changing, the needs that creates, the objectives or outcomes they're trying to achieve, and what are the priorities that of those things to them. If you fully understand the customer, then you can step back and enable your sales reps with the things that are necessary to serve those customers more effectively, better than the competition, and win more deals. And I think sometimes in both marketing and in sales enablement, we don't think clear through to that customer in a very buyer-centric way. I think when you do that and your sales reps see that you're doing things that will help them win more business, sales reps absolutely love sales enablement and are very accepting of it. If you're doing things that the sales reps and you don't check in with them to understand what problems they're having and working with their buyers and winning business, then you're producing things that they won't accept. So I think it's very important to consider both of those perspectives. What's the buyer trying to accomplish? How can I enable sellers to work with them more effectively? And what are the struggles and problems that your own sellers are having? Are those things the same or different? And what things can you do to help them be more effective? If you do those two things, I think your sellers will be very accepting of sales enablement.
Thanks, Mike, for the answer. We have a few more questions, but it's already 6:30 and time to close the session. So thank you so much, Mike, for sharing your knowledge, your perspective about sales enablement and the impact it does on increasing the sales, supporting sales, and how it produces results. I'm sure each one of you had a key takeaway or takeaways would try to apply what you have learned today in your work. And for all the audience, I will meet all of you on 30th of July from a topic from the data science series, why MLOPs are relevant. To register and for more details, please visit nasscom.in/events. Thank you, Mike. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thanks for being here, everyone. I really enjoyed speaking with you.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye.